Rescue efforts for survivors at the collapsed Florida condo enter the 5th day. At least 9 people are dead and more than 150 others still missing. The massive infrastructure package is back on track after President Biden seemed to walk back on the plan last week. The two sides of the aisle working to get the plan through. And lots of states working on what counts as voting rights. Some seeing lawsuits. Others allow non-citizens to vote. Tune in to Deep Dive as we explore these topics and more. Hello and welcome. This is Deep Dive and I'm Tiffany Meier. Lots to cover today, but first some updates. At least 9 people are dead and more than 150 others still missing as rescuers begin their 5th day searching for survivors at the collapsed Florida condo. Crews dug a massive trench around the area to aid in moving debris. They have since been able to move large pieces of rubble, including one weighing about 1,200 pounds. Florida's fire marshal says it's the largest rescue effort the state has ever undergone that isn't related to a natural disaster.
It's the largest effort we've ever had in the history of the state of Florida that's not been a hurricane. It'll be a Greek tragedy if they find that this could have all been avoided. And those families, what they're experiencing right now is so raw, it's not supposed to go through life feeling these type of pains.
Experts from Israel and Mexico have joined the search for survivors, which is getting more desperate by the hour. Family members gathered in Florida Sunday, awaiting news of their loved ones. Photographs of the missing were posted on a nearby fence, along with flowers and messages. And questions are mounting over what caused the collapse. Miami's mayor ordered an audit over the weekend of all buildings 40 years old and above.
So we're going to conduct this audit within the next 30 days, and we are beginning right now.
Investigators have not said what caused the condo building to fall, but in 2018, an engineer warned the Homeowners Association he found major structural damage there. At least one lawsuit has been filed since the collapse. It's seeking $5 million in damages. The complaint claims repair needs had been identified but had not been implemented. We reached out to Champlain Towers for comment but didn't immediately hear back. While questions around the cause of the tragedy remain, crews continue to work, hoping to find survivors in the collapsed building. Now let's do a quick update on the infrastructure package. It's back on track after a rocky start last week. A lot of outrage last week after President Biden appeared to say he would only sign the $1.2 trillion infrastructure deal in exchange for passage of his American Families Plan. That's a multi-trillion-dollar deal, and it's only backed by Democrats. Biden clarified his stance over the weekend, saying that his comments made it seem like he was going to veto the plan that he just agreed to, but he said that was not his intent. After Biden clarified that he will not veto the measure, many now saying they believe there's enough support to get the 60 votes needed to pass the filibuster. Both Senators Mitt Romney and Jon Tester say they believe there's now enough Republican support. Senator Mitt Romney says he takes the president at his word that he will not veto the infrastructure bill. And he says he'll support a bill that fixes infrastructure, but not one that increases taxes to do so.
That is not something we will support. But fixing the infrastructure in our country, fixing our airports and our roads and bridges, transit system, rail, those are the kinds of things we will support. Don't raise the taxes, fix infrastructure, we can get the job done.
Democrats have said they wanted to pass the American Families Plan, which costs about $1.8 trillion, and they would do so by budget reconciliation, which could bypass the GOP filibuster with only 50 votes and VP Harris's breaking the vote. A senior White House advisor expects Biden will sign both his American Families Plan and his American Jobs Plan if they make it to his desk.
And we expect to have both bills in front of us to sign. And I expect that President Biden will sign the infrastructure bill. He will sign the Families Plan.
Biden is expected to visit Wisconsin Tuesday to promote the infrastructure package. Now let's turn to the controversies around what counts as voting rights. Let's kick off in the Lone Star State. Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton says his office has over 500 voting fraud cases that are waiting to go to court. Paxton posted in response to a tweet by Texas Governor Greg Abbott. Abbott's tweet says voter fraud is real and Texas will prosecute it whenever and wherever it happens. We will continue to make it easy to vote but hard to cheat. Paxton's tweet echoes that, saying we will prosecute voter fraud every time we find it. The Texas legislature was just about to pass a sweeping election security bill when Democrats coordinated a walkout before the final vote to approve the measure. The law would grant more rights to poll watchers and create new penalties for election officials who restrict their movement. It would allow judges to void elections if the number of fraudulent votes exceeds the margin of victory, and it would impose criminal penalties on election officials for sending out mail-in ballots to people who don't request them. Democrats say the bill would restrict access to minority voters. Last week, Abbott announced a special legislative session to complete the election security bill, along with bills on critical race theory and bail bonds. Now, what about Arizona? The official Twitter account for the Maricopa County audit announced they finished the hand recount and paper ballot examination. Audit liaison Ken Bennett tells the Associated Press that the final report will take several weeks or months to complete. The auditors previously said that the report would be done in August. Bennett says that auditors are still examining voting machines and election servers. Some Republicans from other battleground states have been pushing for their own audits. State Senator Dave Argall says it's possible that Pennsylvania could have an audit similar to the one in Arizona. He says he doesn't see the danger in it since it's a very careful forensic audit. Democrats have consistently cast doubt about the credibility of the audit. Arizona Secretary of State Katie Hobbs tells Bloomberg News that auditors have a highly partisan agenda. Speaking of Pennsylvania, lawmakers there are passing a major election reform bill and a constitutional amendment. Both would require voter ID. The author of the bill, House State Government Committee Chairman Seth Grove, tells NTD that the bill aims to make it easy to vote and hard to cheat.
Voter ID for in-person signature verification, which Pennsylvania had up until the 2020 general election when the Supreme Court removed it. Prior to that, we bring that back in. We require training for elections directors for signature verification.
In addition to that, the bill would also expand access to early in-person voting and curbside voting, improve voter rolls, and require audits after every election. Grove says the measures enjoy widespread support, citing a poll by Franklin and Marshall College in Lancaster, Pennsylvania.
71% of Pennsylvanians, Republicans, Democrats, Independents, that poll came back that 71% of respondents support voter ID. 80+% support signature verification.
Pennsylvania's Democratic Governor Tom Wolf has stated that he will veto the bill if it reaches his desk. Grove says the governor has not negotiated with Pennsylvania Republicans on the bill, and he explains what the state lawmakers are going to do in the case the governor vetoes.
We will move on to doing constitutional amendment for voter ID, and then we will be moving off of election reform, and we're going to take it to the people. If Governor Wolf doesn't want to work with us, we'll take it to the people.
Grove is confident that voter ID will become law through a ballot proposal because these ballot questions pass 80% of the time in his state, and support for voter ID is high. Meanwhile, the Pennsylvania Senate passed a constitutional amendment last Wednesday requiring voter ID for all ballots. Currently, Pennsylvania voters only need to provide ID the first time they vote in person. And as for the Peach State, the Justice Department is suing Georgia's new voting laws. Attorney General Merrick Garland announced Friday that the Department of Justice is suing the state of Georgia over the passage of a new voting law that he claimed would disproportionately affect black voters.
And I promised that we are scrutinizing new laws that seek to curb voter access, and that where we see violations of federal law, we will act.
Republican lawmakers in Georgia pushed back immediately against the move. Georgia Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger also sent out a statement saying that the Biden administration continues to do the bidding of Stacey Abrams and spreads more lies about Georgia's election law, adding, "I look forward to meeting them and beating them in court." Georgia passed a sweeping voting law on March 25th called the Election Integrity Act, introducing stricter voter ID requirements for absentee ballots, limiting drop boxes, and expanding the state legislature's power over elections. Many other Republican-led states have been doing the same to overhaul the election system after the turmoil of the 2020 presidential election. Republicans say the new laws are to stamp out voter fraud, while Democrats call it voter suppression. Friday's lawsuit is the first major challenge under President Biden against election reform measures in Republican-majority state legislatures. There is growing pressure on the Biden administration to respond to the series of voting laws passed in red states this year. Earlier last week, Senate Republicans blocked the Democrats' For the People Voting Rights bill. And over in Vermont, non-citizens can vote. Non-citizen legal residents in 2 cities in Vermont can now vote in local elections. That's the city government and school district elections. The cities are the capital city, the city of Montpelier, and Winooski. Both have a population around 7,000. The 2 cities are the 17th and 18th most populous in Vermont. So how did this all come about? Back in May, lawmakers passed 2 bills. The next month, Republican Governor Phil Scott vetoed them. His reasoning, he said this is an important policy discussion that deserves further consideration and debate. Adding, I understand these charter changes are well-intentioned, but I asked the legislature to revisit the issue of non-citizen voting in a more comprehensive manner and develop a statewide policy or a uniform template and process for those municipalities wishing to grant the right of voting in local elections to all legal residents. He wants the same rule to apply to the entire state. But then the Vermont legislature voted to override the governor's vetoes. They voted largely along party lines, with the House vote at 103 to 47 and the Senate vote at 20 to 10. State House Speaker Jill Krowinski opposed the governor's vetoes. She writes that while she can appreciate the governor's desire to have a statewide framework for policy and that it is important in some policy matters, she says it simply doesn't work in situations like this that require charters to be tailored to a specific community. But what do you think? Let me know below. Thanks for tuning in to Deep Dive. I'm Tiffany Meier, and see you soon.